When my 200-year-old family ranch in Texas was threatened, I never imagined the danger would come from the local HOA. Karen Walker, obsessed with control and a perfect community, escalated her petty complaints into a shocking show of intimidation. But when I stood my ground and called the authorities, everything changed in an instant. And just wait until you see how the tables turned and why justice ultimately prevailed in this unbelievable showdown. My ancestral ranch in Texas had been part of my family for over 2 centuries. It had withstood everything history could throw at it: torrential storms that flattened barns, economic collapses that forced neighbors to sell, even the slow creep of time that eroded fences and rooftops. Every beam, every stone, every winding dirt road told a story of resilience, of generations who had fought to keep this land alive. And yet nothing in all that history had prepared me for the threat that arrived quietly, in the guise of suburban authority. It was a calm morning, the sun just rising over the mesquite trees, painting the horizon in shades of gold and rose. I was sitting on the porch with a steaming cup of coffee, the aroma mingling with the fresh scent of hay and wildflowers. Everything seemed ordinary, almost idyllic, until the black SUV appeared at the entrance of the driveway. At first, I thought it was a neighbor or a delivery, but the moment I saw the car's polished surface reflecting the sunlight, I felt a twinge of unease. The engine idled, silent except for the faint hum, as the vehicle came to a stop, intentionally, purposefully, blocking my path. Then she emerged, Karen Walker, the HOA president, a woman whose reputation for rigid enforcement and sharp words had long been whispered about among the community. Her presence was immediate, commanding, almost theatrical, as though she had rehearsed this moment countless times in her mind. She didn't just step onto the property. She announced herself, shouting in a tone that was equal parts fury and authority, "You're breaking the rules." I froze. At first, I assumed she meant another one of the minor infractions she was famous for: an overgrown hedge, a mailbox slightly askew, a decorative wagon wheel she deemed unauthorized. But then she drew something from her jacket. My heart lurched as I realized what it was. A small firearm leveled directly at me. My coffee trembled in my hand. The realization hit like a physical blow. She was serious. She was prepared to escalate a simple complaint over a fence into something unthinkable. For a few suspended seconds, time itself seemed to slow. I could feel my pulse in my ears, the wind on the porch suddenly heavy and tense. The familiar creak of the rocking chair beneath me felt exaggerated, almost deafening. My mind raced. How could a private property dispute have escalated into this? My ranch had survived hurricanes, droughts, and the test of 2 centuries. And now I faced danger not from nature, but from a person entrusted with the maintenance of community order. Shock paralyzed me. I couldn't move, couldn't speak, and every instinct screamed at me to react. Yet the immensity of the moment made inaction impossible. The absurdity of it all, the thought that a historical ranch steeped in legacy and sweat could be threatened over a minor violation, struck me harder than any storm ever could. My body tensed, my eyes locked on her, trying to read intention, to find reason, to understand why a simple morning had turned into a confrontation that no one could have anticipated. And in that suspended, terrifying moment, I understood something crucial. The battle I was about to face wasn't against nature or circumstance. It was against human obsession, ego, and fear, qualities as unpredictable and dangerous as any force of the natural world. My ranch, my family, and my history were at stake, and I had no choice but to confront the shock before it consumed me entirely. Why did Karen act like this? The question circled in my mind, echoing louder with every shout and glare. It wasn't about rules or fences or even the community standards she claimed to uphold. No, this was something deeper, something darker. Karen Walker was obsessed with control. Her life revolved around the idea of a flawless neighborhood, a world where every lawn was immaculately trimmed, every mailbox perfectly aligned, and every stone in place according to her vision of order. And my historic ranch, with its weathered fences, sprawling pastures, and the kind of charm that came only from 2 centuries of life, threatened that vision. I watched her pacing the driveway, black heels clicking against the gravel like a metronome counting down my patience. Her hair was perfectly styled, her blazer crisp, but it wasn't her appearance that made her intimidating. It was the energy she carried, a kind of unwavering intensity that left no room for compromise. Every word she spoke dripped with self-righteousness. "The law is above all," she repeated, as though the phrase alone could bend reality to her will. And every time she said it, I felt my own blood pressure rise. The law wasn't her private weapon. It was a framework, a guide. But to Karen, it was a sword she wielded to cut anyone who didn't conform. Her obsession with control wasn't just frustrating, it was suffocating. She had a way of magnifying the smallest imperfections into catastrophes. A crooked fence post, a single untended bush, a paint color that didn't meet her standards, each one became proof of disobedience, evidence that she could use to dominate and intimidate. And today, somehow, I had become her target. My centuries-old ranch, the land that had seen generations of my family toil and thrive, was a symbol of imperfection in her world, a world she believed must be polished and disciplined at all costs. I could see it in her eyes, the fire of hatred, the spark that made her relentless, almost fanatical. She wasn't just enforcing rules, she was punishing me for existing as a living contradiction to her ideals. Every syllable of her voice cut sharper than the last. "This isn't acceptable!" she yelled. "You're putting the community at risk." Each threat she made, every mention of police involvement, felt like a calculated effort to crush not just my property, but my spirit. Her obsession fed on fear, and she wielded it skillfully, leaving me trapped between disbelief and anger. And with every passing second, my own feelings hardened. Hatred grew inside me, a quiet, smoldering force that refused to be ignored. Not just for the threats or the shouting, but for the audacity of her fanaticism, her refusal to see the humanity behind the fences and fields. I hated the way she measured everything in absolutes, the way she turned minor infractions into personal vendettas. Her passion for control, which she likely believed noble, became a weapon of intimidation and cruelty, aimed directly at the history and heart of my family's legacy. By the time she paused to catch her breath, threatening again to handle this seriously, I realized my shock had transformed into something else entirely, a deep, unyielding hatred. Not random anger, not fleeting irritation, but the kind of hatred that demands justice, the kind that steals your resolve. I knew that this confrontation was no longer just about a fence or a rule. It was a test of endurance, of patience, and of standing firm against someone who saw dominance as a right. And I was determined not to let her win. Gradually, a different feeling began to rise within me. Anger. At first, it was subtle, a low heat simmering beneath the surface of shock and hatred, but it quickly became impossible to ignore. Sitting there on the porch, watching Karen pace and shout, I realized that if I remained passive, if I allowed fear to dictate my actions, I would lose not only control of the moment, but also the dignity and safety of my family's legacy. My anger was not random or destructive. It was purposeful. It was the kind of anger that sharpens the mind, focuses the body, and forces clarity when chaos threatens to overwhelm. I reached for my phone and dialed the police. The act was steady, deliberate, almost mechanical, yet each ring echoed with tension. Every second felt stretched, every word she shouted amplified by the silence between calls. Karen had not anticipated resistance. She seemed so certain that her intimidation alone would bend reality to her will. But now, as I spoke firmly, explaining the situation to the dispatcher, I felt a shift within her. The confidence in her eyes faltered slightly as she realized that her actions had consequences beyond my personal response. Remaining calm was not easy. My hands shook with a mixture of fear and controlled fury, my heart thrumming a rapid rhythm against my ribs. Yet even amid this tension, I spoke clearly, assertively, letting her know that I understood my rights and that threatening me with a firearm was not only unacceptable, it was illegal. Every word I said was a shield, a declaration that I would not be intimidated no matter how brazen or irrational she became. Anger became my ally, pushing aside paralyzing fear and replacing it with determination. Karen, sensing the shift, stepped closer, pistol still raised. The sun caught its metal surface, reflecting back at me like a cold, silent warning. I didn't panic. Instead, I moved quickly to a safe spot on the porch, keeping my eyes on her every motion. Every fiber of my being was alert, aware, prepared, but not out of recklessness. Anger had sharpened my focus, allowing me to navigate the danger without losing control. My voice remained steady as I repeated that she must put the weapon down and step back, reinforcing both the legal reality and the moral weight of her actions. Minutes stretched like hours until the unmistakable sound of sirens announced the arrival of the police. Relief mingled with the anger that had been building inside me. The officers moved swiftly, taking control of the situation as Karen's own certainty crumbled. I watched, a complex swirl of emotions rising, as she was guided into handcuffs. Her face, once filled with fury and fanaticism, now twisted with shock, disbelief, and the harsh realization that her actions had consequences. Tears of anger, fear, and release welled in my eyes. Anger had carried me through the confrontation, giving me strength when fear threatened to paralyze me. And now, as I stood on the porch, I could finally exhale, feeling a deep sense of justice in the air. Karen, who had tried to dominate and intimidate, was finally facing the accountability she had long avoided. The ranch, my family's history, and my own sense of safety had endured, thanks in large part to the controlled, focused anger that refused to let her prevail. In the days that followed, the whirlwind of events finally began to settle, and the legal process moved with surprising speed. The court system, which I had always respected for its fairness, acted decisively once the evidence was laid out. Karen Walker faced the charges for threatening a life and the illegal use of a firearm, and there was no room for negotiation or evasion. It was a relief unlike any I had experienced before, an acknowledgement that the law could protect the innocent and hold the reckless accountable. Watching the proceedings unfold, I felt a deep, satisfying sense that justice, often slow and uncertain, had finally prevailed. For centuries, my family had preserved this land against storms, economic hardships, and countless other challenges. Now, in what could have felt like a trivial confrontation, the ranch's very essence, the legacy of perseverance and care, had been tested once more. And yet, as the court confirmed that our home was safe, I realized that the battle had never been solely about property. It had been about respect, about standing up for what is right, even when faced with someone consumed by obsession and control. The relief I felt was not just personal, it was profound, almost spiritual, like a weight lifted from the shoulders of history itself. Returning to the ranch that evening, I walked along the familiar paths, the golden light of sunset spilling across the fields and barns. Every breeze seemed to carry a quiet approval, every rustle of leaves a reminder of the resilience embedded in these grounds. The old fences, the weathered gates, the sprawling pastures, they had endured, and so had we. Peace had returned not only to the land, but to the rhythm of life that had been interrupted by fear and tension. I could finally breathe, truly breathe, without the shadow of intimidation lingering in the corners of my home. Sitting once again on the porch, I allowed myself to reflect on what had transpired. It struck me how fragile strength can appear in the face of threats, and yet how enduring it can become when guided by truth and courage. Standing firm, calling for help when necessary, and trusting both my rights and my instincts had transformed anger and fear into a form of empowerment. The ranch, a symbol of generations of endurance, had become a testament to the idea that standing up for what is right, even against irrational threats, carries its own kind of quiet heroism. As the evening settled in, I watched the horizon darken and the stars begin to emerge above the Texan plains. The sense of satisfaction I felt was layered. Relief, pride, and gratitude intermingled with the knowledge that this land would continue to be a sanctuary for family, memory, and legacy. Karen Walker's actions had tested our resolve, but they had also revealed the strength inherent in standing firm, in defending not only property, but principle. The ranch was safe. Justice had been served. And as I breathed in the cool, tranquil evening air, a simple truth became clear. True strength is not the absence of fear, but the courage to act rightly in spite of it. For centuries, this land had witnessed trials of all kinds. Now, with the threat behind us, it could witness peace once more, a peace earned through steadfastness, resolve, and the unwavering belief that some things, history, family, truth, are worth protecting at all costs.